Hey story fans, welcome back to the Writing Ref, where I don't hate, I just officiate your favorite movies. Superman hit theaters this weekend and there's a lot of well-deserved hype. I just saw it too, and so I can add to the hype that this is a film that I love. This is not a dedicated movie review channel like you'll find all over the internet. This is a story analysis channel for writers and people who love to talk about the craft of storytelling and the way stories are told, coming from an experienced author with more than 20 years of experience. And with Superman, we have the unique opportunity to analyze two films from two completely different eras, from two different auteurs, who included a very similar scene in their movie where Superman has to turn himself in to authorities. So let's get to the breakdown of that right now.
What do I sacrifice? Everything!
Okay, and we're back. Remember to subscribe if you like this video, as we'll be calling some penalties soon on Ironheart, talking more about the unusual hero's journey Superman has compared to the typical modern myth, and we'll be covering some winning writing and storytelling techniques from the Squid Game franchise. Now, on with Superman. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel of 2013 and James Gunn's Superman of 2025 come from two different eras, and believe it or not, Internet, it's more than okay to be a fan of both of them. It'll be very interesting for people learning the craft of storytelling to dive deep into why each Superman story turned out the way it was, because they're way more than the vision of the particular auteur, but a reflection of Western society at the time of their release. Rather than dive deep into each movie entirely, we can isolate on very similar scenes and kind of get a sense of where the zeitgeist was of our culture at the time. Furthermore, it allows us to examine two sides of the same coin for the mythology of Superman. Final warning, there will be spoilers for the Superman movie currently in theaters, so if you haven't seen it yet, go see it. Seriously, go see it. Don't spoil yourself here, because you'll be missing out on a cultural event, not simply a film. In Man of Steel, Clark, aka Kal-El, has just completed a journey to learn about who he really is. In fact, he's very recently taught himself to fly, what I still feel like is perhaps the best flying sequence in any Superman film or TV show. At the same time, Lois Lane has been shadowing him on his journey, and she's figured out that Clark Kent ain't from around here. The key here is Clark has not even shown up yet to do any hero work. He doesn't even seem to be considering it until Zod suddenly shows up and threatens the planet if Kal-El doesn't turn himself in. So that's the setup situation for Man of Steel. In Superman, Superman has his official name. Lois is his girlfriend, she knows who he is, the Justice Gang knows who he is, and the public loves him because he's been Supermaning for 3 years. He's saved countless people, and he's even stopped a war. In fact, the film makes it a big point of contention on how he stopped the war. But while that's all going on, Lex Luthor manages to break into the Fortress of Solitude, after quite an interesting plan, kidnap Krypto, and repair the second half of a recording from Superman's parents on Krypton. In a scene that's very reminiscent of when Mysterio reveals Peter Parker's identity to the world, this happens on a big screen as well. Luthor reveals credible evidence that Superman's people sent him to conquer or lord over the people of Earth, while he put together a harem of ladies to repopulate the Kryptonian race. So there's no batch of Codex cloned babies in this version of Superman. He's got to repopulate the Kryptonian race the natural way, let's say. Immediately, this turns a lot of the public against Superman, where they're not sure what to think. And he doesn't turn himself in immediately. So in both cases, in Man of Steel and Superman, you've got this message from the villain that says, hey, your person here on Earth amongst you is actually a bad guy. In the Man of Steel, the villain shows up and says, basically, there's an alien or a god amongst you, hiding in plain sight. In Superman, people have experienced Superman as a benevolent god that they can also run to and help sometimes. They want to return the favor as much as they can possible. But he's still a benevolent, godlike person that is out in the open already. But as we'll see, the Man of Steel Superman is a human, feels a little bit trapped by his humanity, that is trying to discover his alien or godlike purpose. And the Superman of today, in 2025, is a godlike hero that is learning to prioritize his humanity over the things that make him special. Now, each version of Superman has a bit of a struggle scene before they turn themselves in. In Man of Steel, he essentially goes to a priest and says, what do I do? And there's all this Christian imagery that is very famously sometimes either made fun of, sometimes delved into, because people like that. In Superman, it's more of a discussion with Lois in a personal relationship, where he says, I'm going to turn myself in. So, and outside is this crazy beast that the Justice Gang is fighting, an interdimensional beast, which for a long time I thought was going to be Brainiac or something, like Brainiac's ship or something like that. But no, it's just an interdimensional beast, and he's like, they got that. Now we understand the poster where he's putting on his boots reluctantly, and what that all meant. And it's about having to turn himself in while the world trusts those corporate heroes out there, and they don't really, all of a sudden, they don't trust him. And so one version of Superman is grappling with a higher purpose, and the other version of Superman has already had what he thought was his higher purpose, and now his world is being shattered and he has to question it all over. More layers of conflict you can add to a decision, sometimes the more intriguing that decision for a character will be. So Superman doubts himself and he doubts his purpose, and with no other way to find Krypto, because threatening Luthor certainly didn't work.
Dog.
The dog, Luther! You took the dog!
That's right, you get all of this.
Where's the dog?
I have no clue what you're talking about.
He decides maybe he should turn himself in, and does. Back to Man of Steel, when Kal-El, who's still not called Superman, turns himself in, he floats above the military, revealing himself for the first time, and revealing some of his power. He's able to negotiate the terms of his surrender, and he's even a bit rude to the military presence confronting him.
Got our attention. What is it you want?
I would like to speak to Lois Lane.
What makes you think she's here?
Don't play games with me, General. I'll surrender. But only if you guarantee Lois's freedom.
This version of the character is communicating the whole time that he does not have to do this. But he wants to help Lois, and he wants to earn the trust of humanity. Conversely, in Superman, when Clark turns himself in, he's treated like scum and has his head thrust into the ground by Ultraman, creating a pothole. He even says, I'm turning myself in. Is this necessary to be this rough? Or something like that, I'm paraphrasing. And here is where I might be accused of being political, but we cannot ignore what this story is trying to say and where we are in society when we compare these two arrest moments. Culturally, the first scene with Man of Steel, society was looking for a savior because we were cynical and losing trust in our leaders. In the current Superman, I think we've learned that there isn't really a single savior. In fact, trying to find one can be dangerous. But because of that, we're easily manipulated. And that is shown very well in the Superman movie, recent one. In Man of Steel, Superman is turning himself into humanity. But in Superman, he's only able to turn himself in to the ruling class elites, who are envious of him and they want society to fear him instead of love him, so they want to bring him as low as possible. The film is not afraid to say that this happens again and again throughout history, or it's comparing historical examples of this happening. And is very close to what two Jewish immigrants originally envisioned when they created the character. The final part of each arrest is the interrogation. So let's start with Superman of this year, because after he is arrested, he's essentially disappeared from not just any sort of legitimate authority, but from the world itself. The pocket universe that he's placed in is very reminiscent of the Phantom Zone, and which is often found in a lot of Superman lore. But there's a lot of symbology about how all the prisoners are kept in boxes, and they're not really criminals or threats to society, but just people who made Lex Luthor mad. I'm sure some of them you can point out in Easter eggs might be metahumans or whatever, but Luthor tries to interrogate Superman and get what he wants by killing normal citizens one by one. It almost makes me wonder what in the cultural zeitgeist Russian roulette had, because James Gunn was writing Superman while season 2 of Squid Game came out, but all of a sudden Russian roulette is very symbolic in more than ways of how the elites gamble with our lives sometimes. But in Man of Steel, conversely, Kal-El turns himself in, or the military gives Kal-El to Zod, who actually tries to get Superman on his side at first, rather than just interrogating him. And it's done in his own twisted way, but then he gives up and wants to weaken Superman to pull the codex from his body, which will kill him. So we have a weakened Superman, one by obvious kryptonite and other by like a made-up kryptonite, when they were trying to be more realistic with Superman's weaknesses, and they ended up using kryptonite later on anyways. But so again, the interrogation moments are similar but different, and it ends up being Lois with the help of an ally to save Superman from the situation. So, as George Lucas would say, it's like poetry, it rhymes. Now, culturally, in Man of Steel, the villain represents our fear of a threat of replacement. Our cultural fear in 2013 was the world was changing too fast. We as humans were being replaced by progress. Either AI was on the horizon, or outside forces of some version of the elites that we didn't trust. And that would require replacing us, our humanity, our race, ideas and such, by terraforming us against our will. And Superman is the savior outsider who might save us from such a fate if only we would trust him and work with him. Conversely, the villain of Superman 2025, Lex Luthor, represents not a threat of humanity being replaced, but he considers himself the perfect leader for the world. And I think as a society, we are starting to recognize people like this, people who want to be king, and most of all, want to get rid of anyone who steals their spotlight. The real thing stealing his spotlight is a power he can't understand, the frail side of humanity, or the side that he would consider frail, the empathy, our regard for each other. That is why he can't understand that Metamorpho will gain the courage to help Superman when he sees innocents being killed. In conclusion, or ultimately, the difference in the two Superman arrests reflect where we are as a society. In 2013, we were hopeful of some leader to save us from our own cynicism and to fight off a world being terraformed too fast. In 2025, we realized that our own hope and our own humanity is much more powerful than any one leader, any one savior. And we're seeking a Superman within us who is more with us than some external force to show us the way. That doesn't mean that we've lost faith or we as a spiritualness to our society, but we've realized that our connection to each other is our most powerful spiritual asset. So what did you think of the new Superman movie? And I want to hear from you in the comments, especially if you love both of them. If you can compare where you were in your personal life and what they meant to you, please comment. I'd love to discuss with you. As always, I'm the Writing Ref, and that's been The Call.